This week on Christian World News, journey with us to one of the oldest Christian countries in the world.
I come from a very ancient, perhaps one of the most ancient cultures in the world.
6,000 miles from the shores of America, the tiny nation of Georgia fights to preserve its Christian past, present, and future.
Georgians have always had to defend their faith, even to the last drop of blood.
And meet one of Georgia's most famous men, leading the charge to protect faith in his nation. Hello everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas. On this special edition of the broadcast, we focus on a part of the world few people have ever heard of or know its location. I traveled some 6,000 miles to the tiny nation of Georgia. No, I am not talking about the state here in the U.S., but an ancient land where culture, tradition, and faith in Jesus Christ run deep. It was famed novelist John Steinbeck who, while traveling through the Soviet Union in 1947, referred to this land as a kind of second heaven. And it's easy to see why. Once part of the Communist Empire and often called the Riviera of the Soviet Union, the Republic of Georgia nestles between the Caucasus Mountains and the Black Sea. Turkey and Armenia flank its southern border. Azerbaijan is to the east, Russia to the north. Levan Vazadze is a Georgian businessman.
I come from a very ancient, perhaps one of the most ancient cultures in the world.
An ancient place where people speak a language that's over 2,000 years old. Ethnographer Luasab Togonitse says his is a country that has also witnessed its fair share of turmoil.
Georgians go through a lot. Because of the geographical location, many armies, invaders would pass this way.
History here is measured in millennia, not centuries. And throughout the ages, your country has been the playground for numerous empires.
The Ottomans, the Persians, the Greeks, the Byzantine Empire, the Romans, the Mongols, the Russians.
In the capital city of Tbilisi, the ancient and modern mix seamlessly to create a beautiful portrait of Georgia's rich culture and traditions. One of the best ways to take in the sights and sounds of Tbilisi is to take one of these trolleys up the mountain. In filming these scenes of Tbilisi and stunning countryside landscapes, Georgian cameraman Georgi Shamazana said it best. Every time I travel in different regions of my country, I feel like I'm traveling through thousands of years of history. Georgians are legendary for their hospitality. They believe guests come from God and as such are treated with honor. Their food is simply out of this world. For example, you have this amazing dish, it's called khinkali, and the all-famous hachapuri. Friendship is highly valued in the society, and family is paramount. But if there is one thing many Georgians cherish most, it is their faith. Vasadze says Christianity, above all else, has protected and preserved his nation.
The reason Georgia remained what it is, because our nation has a profound feeling of responsibility to holding on to the eternal features of our national character, which by all means are rooted in the Christian culture.
Georgia is one of the oldest Christian countries in the world. Its Christian heritage can be traced here to the small town of Mshketa. It was around 326 AD when a woman evangelist named Nino started preaching the gospel here.
And where these two rivers meet, two main rivers of Georgia, there was a big baptism. And it's considered to be second Jerusalem for Georgians. It's a holy place.
Christianity spread to the rest of the country and in about 10 years became the state religion. 5 crosses symbolizing Christianity's influence adorn the Georgian national flag. Dating back to the 4th century, the church has played a significant role in the society. In fact, about 80% of Georgians say they belong to the Orthodox Church.
Georgians have always had to defend their faith, even to the last drop of blood.
Iona Gamrakeli is a prominent leader in the Georgian Orthodox Church. He says over the centuries, many Christians became martyrs for refusing to renounce their faith. In 1226 alone, Muslim invaders beheaded more than 100,000 Georgian Christians.
There have been numerous attempts by invading armies to force us to give up our faith, but we never back down.
Ellen Kavlelashvili is curator at Georgia's National Museum. She has in her collection priceless manuscripts, rare Bibles, and other historical artifacts documenting Georgia's Christian heritage.
Today, the role of Christianity is even more significant as we face new challenges.
Kavlelashvili believes her country today stands at a crossroads, with the countries of Central Asia, Russia, Europe, and the Middle East all vying for cultural and religious influence. She says tiny Georgia must once again stand to protect her heritage.
I hope Georgia's example of unconditional love and dedication to faith are a testimony to all mankind. People should realize that the absence of faith is disastrous for a nation. Christianity is how we survived in the past, and it's how we will survive in the future.
Up next, as our special coverage from Georgia continues, a closer look at how modern influences are challenging this nation's deep religious values.
People want to know, is there a plan and how do you find it?
CBN presents The Plan. 8 keys for understanding God's will for your life.
We're going to talk about God's plan for your life.
Is there a plan for everyone's life?
In Pat Robertson's latest teaching, you'll discover the secret to knowing and living out God's unique purpose for you.
The plan of God will be unfolded in your life in ways you couldn't believe possible.
In The Plan, Pat reveals the principles to understanding God's will so that you will be filled with peace, provision, joy, and satisfaction. Plus, see amazing stories of how others are living out their individual purpose intended by God.
God is faithful, and we did what He told us to do.
Live the life God has designed for you.
I hope that God works out a plan in you that will bring blessing, joy, peace, and happiness.
Get The Plan. Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
And welcome back to the broadcast. The Republic of Georgia is one of the oldest Christian countries in the world. For centuries, numerous empires have tried to eliminate Christianity there. Now, Georgia faces a new challenge to its values and its faith, this time from the United States and Europe. 25 years after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Georgia's Prime Minister says forging ties with the West is in his country's best interest.
There is a very clear will of Georgian people and population to be pro-Western, to be pro-European.
The tiny nation of Georgia lies between Russia and Turkey. While the majority here favor closer ties,
we are not saying we are against West. I always say I'm a big enthusiast of selective Westernization of Georgia.
Many like Levan Vazadze insist the opening must not happen at the expense of Georgia's faith and family values.
We'll take all the productive, progressive things from you, but we'll throw in garbage all the nonsense. And unfortunately, in this particular case, this means your current pseudo-moral standards need to stay outside of Georgia.
Vazadze is a prominent Georgian businessman and pro-family advocate. The pseudo-moral standards he refers to are efforts by the US and EU to force Georgia into accepting homosexual practices and same-sex marriage as societal norms.
If you think indecent, radically sexual behavior is what you want to do, that's your choice. But if I think that this is an embarrassing sin, I want to remain in a society which is allowed to say that.
Much to his dismay, the Georgian parliament, under pressure from the European Union and with help from international pro-gay groups, passed a controversial law in 2014 making it illegal to discriminate against people on the basis of their sexual orientation. Vazadze says the decision amounted to the legalization of homosexuality in Georgia. You say this law is part of an international agenda. What is that agenda?
To destroy a family. I believe the front line of this war is in every living room and in every bedroom, where your wife and my wife, our children, sleep.
The front line is now spreading to Georgian classrooms, with children as young as 8 being taught gender theory.
To somehow alter and change.
Tinatin Khorbaladze is director of a pro-family organization. She says the aim is simple yet alarming.
To change the thinking of the children, to be open and to accept the things that still my generation and elder generation consider to be not really acceptable.
Georgia is deeply conservative. More than 80% of the population here say they belong to the Orthodox Church, and polls show a majority side with the Church in opposing anything other than traditional heterosexual relationships.
We feel the responsibility for the future of this country, for the future of our children and next generation.
But not everyone agrees with the Church's stance on marriage. Some human rights groups have labeled this country one of the most homophobic nations in the world. Are you afraid for your life?
As for me personally, yes, because my life is in danger in Georgia, and not just because of my sexual orientation, but because of my professional activities as well.
Georgi Tatashvili is transgender. He rarely gives interviews, but agreed to meet with CBN News at an undisclosed location in the capital. He is a lawyer for the LGBT community and says he has paid a price for it. They've arrested you, they've beaten you.
Yes, many times I was beaten by policemen, ordinary citizens, and in general from many people.
Tatashvili made headlines earlier this year when he became the first person ever to file a suit with the Constitutional Court seeking same-sex marriage. The lawsuit is still pending. A majority of Georgians today believe that what you're doing, your lifestyle, is sinful. And they say that you are destroying their country.
I think that this is the case, and I'm not surprised people feel this way. The principles of secularism are practically violated in Georgia. The Orthodox Church puts so much pressure on the society to make sure Georgian human rights are not extended to include LGBT people.
Meanwhile, Levan Vazadze worries the pressure to become more accepting of homosexuality in Georgia will only intensify following last year's controversial Supreme Court decision legalizing same-sex marriage in America. He bemoans the fact that since the ruling, many in America are too afraid to speak out against homosexuality.
You can no longer freely express your opinion about what's shameful and what is disgraceful, and you are crucified for that. The whole concept of sin is being abolished. Where is it? The metamorphosis in English language is staggering. I studied it since I was a child, and I remember that shame meant shame. In modern English, when someone says it's a shame, he or she means it's a pity. So we see a gutting of the concept of shame.
Vazadze is praying Georgia never reaches that point. He's urging his fellow countrymen to be bold in proclaiming the truth in love.
Is it your opinion that the church in Georgia, Christians in Georgia like yourself, are in the end going to determine the future of your country?
What else? Of course. That's it. Nothing else.
As our special coverage continues, meet the most trusted man in Georgia who is fighting to keep faith alive.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man, come...
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
How can you find God's plan for your life?
CBN presents The Plan, 8 Keys to Understanding God's Will for Your Life. In Pat Robertson's latest teaching, you'll discover the steps to take in following God's plan, how to know for certain when God is leading you, how to get rid of spiritual blindness and see God work.
God said, I've got a plan to give you a future and a hope.
Get The Plan. Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
We're all in this together. There's no pretenses.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
And welcome back to the broadcast. Across Europe, churches are closing as growing numbers of Christians abandon the faith. But in the nation of Georgia, the opposite is happening. Thanks to the efforts of one man, Christianity there is not only alive, it's thriving.
On any given Sunday morning, you'll find most churches in Georgia packed with the faithful. And one of the first things a visitor will notice is that there are no pews or chairs in most Georgian churches. That's because, unlike typical church meetings, Christians here stand during their services.
We say that Orthodox are like candles because they stand before God in churches. It's uncomfortable to stand for 2 hours, 3 hours in a row, but we choose to.
That was the case during a service at Holy Trinity Cathedral in Georgia's capital of Tbilisi, as thousands stood listening to their nation's most famous citizen. His name, Ilya II, and he leads one of the oldest Christian communities in the world.
The history of the Georgian church dates back to the 1st century AD, when the apostles of Jesus Christ entered Georgia and preached the gospel.
At 83, this elder statesman has been affectionately dubbed the most trusted man in Georgia.
He's the spiritual father of Georgia and a wonderful example of what it means to be a humble servant of God.
You've probably never heard of him, but here in Georgia and surrounding countries, Ilya II is more famous than movie stars and politicians. Patriarch Ilya II is the most respected figure in Georgian society. In fact, his favorable poll numbers are over 90%. In an exclusive interview conducted at his private residence, Ilya II, whose official title is Patriarch of the Georgian Orthodox Church, spoke with CBN News about his country's deep love for God.
The church's past is intertwined with the people and history of our nation. In the 4th century AD, Christianity was officially declared as the state religion.
That makes Georgia one of the oldest Christian countries in the world. Tucked between the Caucasus Mountains and the Black Sea, more than 85% here say they belong to the Orthodox Church. And while many neighboring European countries have seen religious adherence fall, Christianity in Georgia is witnessing unprecedented growth.
We are like the little spiritual oasis in the middle of this region.
Patriarch Ilya II was installed back on Christmas Day 1977, and since then he has managed to single-handedly revive the Georgian Orthodox Church. He took over at a time when Christianity was under severe persecution from the Soviet government.
The Bolshevik invasion in 1921 witnessed the unmerciful destruction of churches and monasteries across Georgia.
Sergo Vardortsanidze is a professor of Georgian history.
There were 1,500 churches and 1,600 clergymen active in Georgia. When the Patriarch was installed, there were only 50 churches and barely 70 priests remaining.
He initiated a range of reforms to rebuild the church, including an emphasis on young people.
He reached out to the youth, encouraging them to attend church and to consider the priesthood. He also took steps to make church services more engaging and easier to listen to.
The church showed signs of revival in the late 1980s. Men like Ione Gamarekeli, impressed by the Patriarch's humility and dedication to service, decided to join the priesthood.
The Patriarch stretched out his hands to the people and the people responded. He preached God's word and people turned to God.
Then came the Soviet Union collapse in the late 90s, which led to Christianity's renewal. The changes have since been profound. Now there are more than 2,000 active churches, with new ones being built every year, like this massive structure rising on the outskirts of Tbilisi. Also, more than 3,000 people have joined the priesthood, serving the spiritual needs of Georgia's nearly 4 million people.
It has been said that the Patriarch inherited a church that was severely persecuted and covered in shroud. Now it is a living body.
Nearly 3 hours after arriving for the service, a slow and frail Patriarch Ilya II finally makes his way through the throngs of worshippers that have gathered to hear him speak this Sunday morning. CBN News is granted unprecedented access to film as hundreds of men, women, and children line the ornate halls of Holy Trinity Cathedral to receive a prayer or special blessing.
The Patriarch always says that all that's been achieved during his reign is because of the Lord's will.
After decades of religious repression, many are grateful that the church in Georgia has not only survived, but is thriving, thanks in part to one man's desire to bring his nation closer to God.
Many kind achievement has been accomplished, and I thank God for letting me undertake such endeavors for our nation.
You can bring these amazing stories from Georgia to your friends and family. Simply go to our CBN News webpage and share it on Facebook and Twitter. Folks, we'll be back right after this.
as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
Well, folks, that is it for this special edition of Christian World News. As always, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of God at work around the world at cbnnews.com. Tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here this week. As always, you can reach out to us via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I hope you will send us your comments, especially on this particular edition. Well, folks, that is it, unfortunately, for this week's edition of Christian World News. From all of us here in the studio, as well as back in the control room, have a fantastic week. And always remember, God bless you and God loves you. Have a great week, guys.